welcome to the mill. Today we have our second in our Stonemaier Spotlight line of videos, and we are doing Charterstone. So with us today, Molly's joining me for this one, and we also have two more Stonemaier Ambassadors who you might know, and I'm going to let Garrett and Connie kind of introduce themselves and where they fit in with Stonemaier. So Garrett, you want to start us off?
Sure. I'm Garrett, Stonemaier Ambassador. I've been an ambassador for about 3 years now. My wife, Allie, and I do a lot of playtesting for Stonemaier. We're pretty heavily involved in the Discord. And when Carol and Molly put out the call for people looking to talk about specific games, I thought Charterstone would be a fun one to talk about.
And my name is Connie Vogelmann. I don't actually think I'm an ambassador, but I'm an honorary ambassador at this point, if nothing else. Folks probably know me as the designer of Apiary and Wormspan, and I'm really excited to talk about Charterstone. It was actually one of the big inspirations for the bump mechanism in Apiary, so it's a game that's very near and dear to my heart.
I think being a Stonemaier designer kind of leads people like to do the ambassador thing. So
it's like the ambassador celebrity thing. Like we have a Stonemaier celebrity, Trump's ambassador.
The hierarchy. She's at the top.
Oh, most definitely. All right. So both Garrett and Connie wanted to help us out with Charterstone as we do kind of more of a deep dive into it. We'll start with some non-spoilery kind of discussion about it, and then we'll let you know when we're getting into spoilers. So I'm gonna try to let Garrett and Connie do a lot of the talking here because you hear Molly and I all the time. But all right, you guys already kind of took care of the one question of, why did you choose Charterstone? Is there any other kind of reason you want to expand on why this would be the game you'd want to talk about from Stonemaier?
So, Connie, you can go first.
Yeah, absolutely. So I can talk about that a little bit. I think that Charterstone was very formative to me. As I said, I was kind of starting to design Apiary at the same time, and that kind of bump mechanism in Charterstone. So if you're not familiar, it's basically the idea. It's a worker placement game, but you put workers on a space, and then the space is never blocked. You put a worker down, and you can basically bump either your own worker or somebody else's worker back to them, and it creates a very different dynamic in a worker placement game. Obviously, Euphoria used that mechanism before, but this was sort of the game for me that I kind of saw that game and really fell in love with the mechanism. I'll say too that there's something about Charterstone that I really enjoyed as well because it was such a simple game and it was so kind of easy to wrap your head around what you were trying to do. But you also sort of felt at the end of every game like, man, I could have timed that better. I could have done something a little bit better. It's kind of this game where you can really kind of see the efficiencies kind of playing out in front of you. And so you kind of always get the sense of like, oh man, let me just try it again and see if I can just do it a little bit better, which I think obviously plays really well into the legacy format.
Yeah, and for me, this was a pandemic game. We were able to get family together pretty regularly to play through it. And it has a very lasting impact, probably because of the social aspect that we had of getting the family together during the pandemic. But we just had a blast playing it. It's just a very friendly, welcoming, even though it's a competitive game. It's difficult to put into words, but we just found ourselves smiling while playing this, no matter what was going on. And another reason is because it's one of the games that I've played the most. I've played at least 4 campaigns of it. So that right there is at least 48 games. It's probably one of my most played Stonemaier games by that fact. So that was another reason I thought it'd be a good one to chat about.
A cat on my lap who's roaring at me silently. She's agreeing with you.
What about you, Carol? We should briefly share our thoughts, because Carol and I won't necessarily both be in all of these, but we both wanted to be here for Charterstone.
Yeah, as Garrett mentioned, he played it 4 times, and one of those times was actually online async with Molly, I, and a few other people. So, yeah, this was one where this was the first legacy game I actually completely finished. We were playing this at the same time as Pandemic Season 1, and this was the first one we finished. And I had been in board gaming for 3 months, and it blew my mind away at that time. And then we played it online, and we got to the kind of the differences probably between the two of them, but very different experiences. And yeah, is that first Legacy game for me.
For me, why I wanted to be here is, we said we'll get into it later, but I've played through this twice and had completely different experiences, and it's just a very interesting game in that regard. I've never had a real-time and async be so different, but also Carol and I bond over loving pretty much any campaign game, so how could we not geek out over the Stonemaier campaign game?
Yeah. All right. So, Connie, you touched on this a decent amount already, but I'll kind of throw it out there for anyone. What stood out to you in regards to Charterstone's design? I think a lot of us, we've played a decent amount of campaign and legacy games. So, I know, Connie, you already mentioned kind of that bumping mechanism and its inspiration. But Garrett, Molly, or just kind of, is there anything else that really stood out to you in regards to it being a legacy game and the design of it that was memorable, or you think really makes it stand out as a legacy?
So I think, from my experiences, the fact that you have your own charter that you're building, along with the other players, and there's a spoilery mechanism that we'll talk about in the, I guess, latter half of the video of why. But I found myself like really focusing on just my charter, and watching other players and their strategies develop around their charters or other players' charters. And so it was just interesting seeing that, yeah, exactly, the various strategies that people were developing as they were building their town. And so it was just very memorable for us, because it's something that we're building that we'll think back on and be like, I remember exactly what I did in my town. I knew exactly what my strategy was, how it worked out for me, how it didn't work out for me. So yeah, I guess just like the building aspect of it was very memorable.
I really enjoy the sense of identity in it. You pick your charter, it's tied to a resource, which everyone interacts with that resource, but it does kind of feel like yours the whole game. And you get to name your charter, and everyone interacts with it, but it's yours still. You pick the buildings in it. And yeah, it just feels really good to have your own chunk of the board and really feel like it's yours.
I do think there's something that's very cozy about Charterstone. I think that's both Carol and Garrett touched on that a little bit, that it's, I think a lot of these legacy games are either cooperative games or they're, a lot more cutthroat. And I think this one sort of falls into a very nice kind of intermediate space where, again, you are competing with other people, but you also have the sort of portion of the board that's your own, that you're building up, that you're making kind of your own, and you're interacting with other players. But it's oftentimes, you might be, racing toward a goal, or you're trying to do more than they do, more efficiently than they do, but you're not really undercutting people or anything like that. And so I do think it's a very good pandemic game, but it's also, again, just kind of a very, very, very positive experience.
Yeah, and even the end game scoring is very friendly. Everyone can kind of get the final objective together. There are a couple exceptions to that, but for the most part, you can all share a victory. No matter what happened, you're earning those other points for other reasons, and that we can talk about, but it's a very friendly scoring game as well.
One thing I wanted to specifically call out a little bit is the kind of race element in the game, in the sense that games can go very long or very short depending on how the players are playing. And I think player-controlled endgame conditions are always very interesting. So, in Charterstone, basically you take certain actions that kind of advance this time track, and then after a certain number of those actions have been taken over the course of the game ends. And I always think that was very interesting from a player standpoint, because you're sort of looking at this tracker and you're like, okay, I might get 3 more turns, I might get 4 more turns, I might get 5 more turns. How do I kind of play around that and sort of set myself up depending, so I'm basically in a good situation regardless. And I think that was sort of for me, that was always a very fun puzzle. So every single time we played, I'm like, all right, how much can I get done this game? How much can I squeak out before that game end trigger hits? So.
Yeah, I remember one of my strategies was to get a lot of points quickly, and then I kind of ran out of steam. And I had other players at the table that had sort of long-term goals, and I knew the longer the game lasted, they were going to either catch up or surpass. So then it became a race of I need to get rid of these influence so that I can end the game quick, because the longer it goes on, they're going to, So yeah, that's a really interesting point. That's definitely the speed of the game is part of your strategy too, where you're trying to like, nope.
Right. Absolutely. And you as an individual player, I mean, probably less in a 5-player campaign than in a smaller campaign, but, you as an individual player can really have a lot of impact on that. And you can, make the game much, much shorter if you want to, which I think is really interesting.
Yep.
And because of that,
Yeah.
you keep an eye on the other players more than like a multiplayer solitaire game. If someone's cranking through it, you got to start changing your strategy.
Mm-hmm.
I will say I found a lot harder to track.
Yes.
Async online. Whereas my in-person game, it was just my husband and I. We didn't put the automas in because I was so new to gaming. It was just the two of us, so we could plan a little bit more.
Yeah.
And then, I found in the async games, I was not keeping track of people. And it was nice to have that timer still up there, but it was a very different experience.
It was, yeah. I played a 6-player in person where we played 2 games a night, and it was totally different than async, where our whole campaign took, was it 2 years? A year and a half? It was, yeah. It was, I much more enjoy it in a real-time sense, if that wasn't clear. Mm-hmm. It was, I would still think the app is great, and if you set up times to play in real-time online, it'd be a very similar experience to the board. Still not quite as good, because you can't name everything, and something about legacy game with ripping things and putting stickers on, it's just special.
And I think there's something...
That's that naming of so many things in Charterstone really gives you that feeling of ownership and just like fun for something so simple.
Well, I know we had a couple of players who would name a lot of the cards and characters pretty goofy things, and without getting into too many spoilers, a lot of those cards do end up getting passed from player to player over the course of the campaign, and so every time you see, you're like, oh, it's that guy again, like it's the guy with the real name and stuff like that. And so I think it just added a lot of character. So I haven't actually played. I have the app, but I haven't played an async campaign or anything like that. My plays of Charterstone have been in person. So I can't really speak to that element, but it does seem like it would definitely lose something.
Yeah, I don't think you name anything except maybe your land initially.
Oh, we lost your audio, Garrett.
Can you hear me?
Yep,
you're good.
Sorry. Yeah, I was saying I think that you name your charter, but other than that, maybe the town also.
We named.
Yeah.
Crazy is in like the physical board game, you name feels like everything.
Yeah, and there's also like multiple menus to see, like to track everything in terms of like, I forget what it's called, the where you're like boasting about things, with the hand. I forget what that's called.
Oh yeah.
But like that's a separate menu, and then like the influence track is, I think, it's a separate menu, and then you kind of have to like click and drag around the board and zoom in and zoom out to see. It's very hard to keep track of everything for sure. So that I was kind of like I said earlier, I just kind of like checked out at when it was my turn. I was just like, what thing is going to give me the most points? Click. And all right, see you guys tomorrow. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. I'd say probably before we get into our spoilery section, one thing I think might be helpful is, do you have any tips for people who are either going to be teaching Charterstone or kind of letting people know, like, hey, if you like these kinds of games, this one might be for you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts, and one is I think if you like fairly straightforward worker placement games, this is definitely one to check out, especially if you think you have the time and the group stability for a 12-game campaign. I think this starts out being very simple, and I think it does certainly get more complex over the course of the campaign, but it never gets like overwhelmingly complicated or anything like that. And so I think it's a very kind of good, lower end of mid-weight gaming experience. I do have one tip though, and this is a bit of an odd one, and we can talk about it a little bit more in the spoiler section. But I would say if you're playing with less than the full complement of 6 players, I actually would recommend excluding the blue faction and playing with the others. Again, talk about why in the spoiler section, but if you're totally new to Charterstone, that's just kind of a recommendation that I would take. It's not that I think that charter is broken in any way, but I think it makes the gameplay a little bit less interesting than playing without it.
Yeah. I don't have any teaching tips. I think the game onboards really well. Most legacy games do. And people learn games differently. Rodney's video was like perfect for our group. We all watched that. We were all ready to go. But I think the rule book is just a very good. It onboards you very well, especially because the first game, you're already like peeling stickers and putting them in the book, and it just you're interacting with the rule book as part of the game. So I think it's a very easy teach, personally.
Makes sense. Yeah, I would definitely say if people are looking for a competitive legacy game, I know initially there weren't a lot of those out there. It's gotten better. But Connie, you also mentioned earlier, this one's almost a more friendly competitive. Like, you're really not going to be cutthroat. So I would definitely say people who want a legacy experience, who can have a group that comes together consistently, and they really don't want to, be too backstabby or political. If they are, then they might want to go to King's Dilemma. But this is, it kind of has that cozy feeling. I think the art goes with that as well. Like, it's happy art. So, any other final comments that are not spoilery for either memorable moments, likes, critiques, anything else that would be non-spoilery in that realm before we move over to the spoiler section?
Let's get to the
Nothing for me.
spoilers.
I'm excited to talk about some spoilers.
Yeah, I think we're ready. I'm already trying not to mess up, so we may as well get to the easier half of the video.
All right, so Molly will put a big spoiler thing up right now when she goes and she edits, and we are going full on spoiler section. So if you don't want to know anything about the campaign, just stop watching right now and join us on the next Stonemaier Spotlight.
Yep, here
All
we
right.
go.
All right, spoiler section.
Hold on.
You guys want to start with? Yep. Okay. You guys want to start with memorable moments? Now that you can say whatever you want.
Let me think about it for a second. Yeah.
Start with the big question.
Starting off with the spoiler, I can get us going with one of my favorite things about this game was it really felt like you get loot. Like, it really feels like when you're opening the crates, stuff is just pouring out, and it's your stuff, and you don't necessarily get to keep it all, but you get first dibs on it, and it's just really fun. And things keep coming, new items, minions, personas, and I just think that's all done really well. It all feels special. I don't remember ever opening anything and being like, oh, that one was a dud.
Yeah.
Did anyone else freak out the first time they realized they weren't going to get to keep all their cards?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Building.
Yep. Well, and then I do think that's interesting, and that's actually one of, I think, the most interesting things about the game is that because so many of the cards get returned to the general supply at the end of every game, your charters get really mixed up. So, I might be the green charter, and then all of a sudden I open a crate from the black line or something like that, and so all of a sudden I have this kind of mix of charters, and I think that's creates some really kind of interesting moments. It gives a lot of the charters a lot of uniqueness. I do remember in particular being like outraged the first time somebody opened a minion. I was like, "Where's my minion?" And I think those are some of the.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was the green in my first campaign.
In our campaign, green was the last to get their minion. So you're waiting. If you're excited about it, you're.
Oh yeah, I was black, and the ghost was the first one that came out. But I remember when the robots came out, the ones that you can take a card directly from the draw, I was like, I built my entire strategy around that. And then once people realized it, they realized kind of how, I don't know if it was powerful, but it felt powerful. And when you can keep like one minion at the end of the game, or you can build up to keep more stuff. That pool was dwindling because we were playing 5 out of 6 players, and that was a memorable moment. Just like the robot synergy that I had with, like, I had items going, popping off constantly. I had the treasure that gave you, like, you could take this action without paying the cost or whatever. I mean, it was just items.
I think actually one of our biggest memorable moments was actually the candle.
Oh yeah.
Anyone who's listening who hasn't played the game, should probably stop. But I mean, there's one game that's basically played on a timer with sort of a little tea light candle, and I still think it was really funny. This was actually before I even played Charterstone myself, but I was watching a campaign, and I was just looked over, and everyone was being really frantic except for one guy. And one guy was just taking his time and relaxing, and he wasn't, was not concerned about the candle at all. And why? Well, he's an Episcopal priest, and then at the end of the game, everyone's like, "Why weren't you rushed?" And he's like, "Oh, those things burn for like hours." And so I just thought it was so funny that everyone else was playing speed Charterstone, and he was just like lackadaisically taking his move. And that's just, I wasn't even in that game, and it was still like one of my like really memorable moments. So
that like really stressed us out in our game, and it got to the point where like everybody was just like, it's distracting us. Like, just blow it out. Nobody take the penalty. Let's just. It was like very distracting and like stressful for us. And then in the digital version, I don't even think it was implemented, or I wasn't sure how it was implemented.
But like it said, like if you took, I think, a black peril, then
Oh yeah,
auto blew it out. And it was like,
yeah. I think that happens in the game, the physical version too.
That was in the physical version as well, because I remember in one of my campaigns, I specifically did that to blow the candle out. I can't remember why. I don't remember what the specific mechanism was, but there was some reason why I thought it was worth it to do it and take the penalty. But yeah, that is how it works in the physical game as well.
yeah, that was it. Like you couldn't actually just physically blow it out online.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of those pieces. Like it was such a moment to open it and be like, "There's a candle in this box. What is?"
Yeah, I don't think there's any other game that has that component. I mean,
No, it was
Yeah.
crazy.
I will say in terms of the peril tokens, that's one thing that I preferred on the digital implementation. Maybe the only thing I preferred, because I felt it was a very tedious process to like set up peril at the start of the game, and those tokens were like really small, and we were just making sure we had all of them and shuffling them up, finding the like a bag or something. But outside of that, like definitely physical version.
Yeah. But I wanted to come back and talk about the minions a little bit, because this was why in the spoiler section before, or in the pre-spoiler section, I mentioned the blue charter in particular. I found that for us at least, we played without the blue charter, and so the robots came into the game really, really late. And I think that was a more fun campaign. And I know Garrett talked specifically about building out the robots specifically. Yeah. But it seems like there's so many buildings in the game that are specifically for trying to draw different types of cards. You can draw a crate or draw an assistant or draw whatever. I don't remember what all the types of cards were. But as soon as you get the robots, you basically place a robot, and then you can pick up any kind of card you want. And so it seemed like it kind of it kind of shrank the board in a way. I mean, it took out a lot of the building spots that I think were otherwise perhaps a little bit more interesting. And so I don't think it's necessarily too strong, but for me at least, it was a little bit less interesting once the robots came into play. But maybe I would have felt differently if I had been the one that unlocked them and had, a robot empire for a little while before everyone else got access to them.
Yeah, I've always been trying to like compare sort of the power of the minions compared, just not like mathing it out, but just like how they feel. And I always felt like the cat was a trap because it's the one VP, and I always like it seems good at first. It's a cat second, like obviously amazing. But I don't know. I just felt like after a while I was like, this isn't going to work out. And then there was one that does the coin. I forget which one that is.
The butler.
Yeah, the butler. And so I just found myself like I guess realizing or thinking that the robot was the way to go, as you said, because it makes things so much easier for your strategy, particularly with like the buildings that have like specific card costs. So, but my strategy was more built around items, which is like use any resources basically to like get points and. I don't know.
I know when I played a second campaign, I think I intentionally gave myself purple with the suspicion that perhaps that is a slightly weaker charter than some of the others. Every charter kind of has their own specialties we've been talking about, and the purple charter is victory point, so it's not only the cats, but a lot of the buildings are like, you get a resource and points instead of a resource and coins, or 2 resources or something like that. So it always felt like a slightly weaker charter. I ended up winning with that charter as well, but I also had more experience than the other people around me, so I think if it's weaker, I don't think it's drastically weaker or anything like that, but I did. Yeah.
So in your games, did you find? No, I was just going to say, in your games, did you have people sort of gravitate, like, because once you open the crates, all the cards are mixed in and they go out to the board. Did you find people sort of gravitating towards their own charter colors to build out their charters, or were people doing a mix and saying, "Oh, look at that purple building. I want the points in my charter," to kind of like negate maybe the power or the strategy around the purple charter itself.
Yeah, I mean, I think that for us, at least, there was definitely a certain amount of like people trying to grab their own stuff back, just because I think there's a certain like attachment. But in all of the campaigns I played, things eventually got pretty shuffled around.
Yeah.
Which, as I said, I think it was something I really enjoyed about the campaign. It's just the kind of different permutations and combinations.
Yeah. I've seen some people buy the recharge pack just to like make their own board on the other side, not play another campaign, but just kind of create a fun. And there's a couple pre-built ones in the Charterstone app as well, which is pretty cool.
Which I will say is pretty unique for a legacy game. A lot of them boast that you can play it at the end with your own unique board, and no one ever does it.
Yeah.
So the fact that people do that with Charterstone, and even there's recommended like town builds out there, I think is really cool.
Yeah, we finished Ticket to Ride Legacy recently, and it has that, unlimited or the infinite game afterwards. We're never going to play it again. Like, there's just too much going on in that game. But Charterstone definitely would return to, just because we built our own worker placement game essentially. It's pretty cool.
I wanted to come back to suspecting purple is the weakest. How do people feel about the balance of the charters? Before this video, I was trying to do some research on if there were strong opinions out there, and there was anecdotal ones, but it didn't really seem nailed down that any were way stronger or way weaker than others, which makes sense because everything gets shuffled up, really.
Yeah, I didn't experience that specifically charter to charter, but definitely like card to card, ability to ability, minion to minion. Those kind of would shine through. But I don't think I noticed a specific charter.
Yeah, we had a pretty good representation and pretty good distribution in the games, in the campaigns that we played. I remember kind of going online. This goes back to when Charterstone was released. And people talking about on BGG about how like, oh, somebody won by 100 points or something like that. And I mean, I have no doubt that you could shuffle up things in a way that especially if there's a big skill gap among the players, that one person would build out a much better charter than others. And there's a few catch-up mechanisms in the game or in the campaign, but they can only do so much. But, we didn't really experience that in any of our campaigns. And the other thing that I think is interesting, too, and this goes back to what Garrett said before, is that, if somebody has a much better engine, you do have a lot of control over that end game. I mean, you really have a lot of opportunity to try to speed the campaign along or speed each game along before they can really get rolling. And so I do think there was a certain... some of the complaints and criticisms I've seen of Charterstone, I'm like, oh, you're missing the sort of key element, and that's that, like, if somebody's rolling away with it, like, cut them off before they get there, So, but yeah, I mean, we really didn't find that any of the charters were particularly strong or particularly dominant.
Yeah, I think I've heard some people, I think because of what you're talking about with the robots here, I've heard some people, like, they'll claim the blue one was really powerful. But I said the buildings get so spread out. I know, especially in an online game, when I would look at that display of what I could get, I was just looking at the powers. Like at that point, I'm like, I don't know if this is mine or not. I don't care. That looks like a cool power, or this I can make more use of.
Yeah.
So I think that
I think
that is probably part of that balancing act of say one more powerful.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Just like that initial sort of how much like an initial feeling can formulate your entire opinion about something, 10 plays later that might have been disproven, but you still had that one bad experience, and it's just like that's overpowered, like because of the thing, and they don't feel versus real kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's
Stonemaier deals with from time to time, frustratingly.
From time to time.
Yeah.
I do think that's an interesting thing just about games in general. I mean, I have a lot of games that are sort of on my hit list, especially games that I played when I was first getting into the hobby that I would guess are perfectly good games, but I just had a terrible experience because of either my mood or the teacher or the other people at the table or anything else. And so I do think that's it's just going to happen, unfortunately.
A bad game with great people is a good experience, overall. Right. So. Did you guys have any like frustrations that lasted through the campaign or specific moments that were like, this is so frustrating? The only thing that I can think of for me was the way that you earn the stars. It's like in increments of 10, and there would be so many times where I'd end at like 7 or 8 or 9, and you're just like, what are we doing here? Like, just give me the star, please. I'm 1 point away. It's such a frustrating like feeling. Not like
Yeah.
game ruining, but that happened fairly often.
I think
And you'd
that's a
always
good
try to
point.
map that out. Like, if I need that one last turn, I'm going to end, at 9. We need to delay because I need to end at 51 instead of 49. And
Yeah.
it
See,
could,
actually, I think I found that like a net positive overall because I really enjoy that kind of mathing in my games. But I understand like it does feel pretty terrible to be at 29 or 39 or 49 or whatever. I mean, I do remember just like that feeling. I think the only real other frustration I had was when I think somebody unlocked their first minions and I didn't realize that the minions would ultimately go into the pool. For everyone to get access to because I think
oh,
they
yeah.
give you a game or two, maybe a game where you have your own minions and no one else can get access to them. And so I was like, "What? They get these cool minions and I get nothing?" And like I
Yeah.
should have trusted the process, but yeah,
The only, and actually this was weird because I wouldn't say I was ever really frustrated until I'm currently in like game 10 or 11 of a campaign online right now. And we have like 3 pretty difficult objectives. And it's the game where you can't use minions.
Oh, yeah.
So you have all these minions, but you can't use them. So it's slower in general. The objectives aren't good anymore. Like there's really hard ones.
Mhm.
Ones we can't get right now. And because it's late in the campaign, there's like no buildings or boxes up top. So the game's just not progressing. So
Yeah.
the game is taking an eternity, plus it's async, because like I don't know a way to move this time marker forward because I can't get an objective. There's no houses to build. There's no crates to unlock. And
Yeah.
so
I mean-
it's a weird drag that I've never,
Yeah.
like I said, I've gone through 2 campaigns, plus we're on, I think it's like game 10, like this is the first time this has ever happened.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, I mean, this
it's
is
very
where-
weird.
it seems like the only option at that point is to start chucking influence, and then once you're out of influence, the marker will kind of
Yeah.
go down automatically. But it's also harder to get rid of influence if you can't take any of those actions either.
Yeah. It's tough to house rule a digital game, too.
That's what I was gonna say.
Retrieval currents.
It being online exasperates it because, like, in the setup, my group might have been like, oh, that's not fun for this game. Someone draw another one. Like,
Yeah.
Oh yeah, for the objectives. Yeah, we totally would have
Mhm.
done that. Yeah, that's the only one. But yeah, as you said, it's mostly probably because it's online. 'Cause you're right. We would have probably called them all again and been like, those just aren't gonna work well for this particular game.
Yeah.
I think that was my only kind of frustrating part. But, yeah. Any other? We've kind of covered a lot at this point. Are there any other kind of final thoughts, comments, experiences you want to end on here for our Charterstone chat?
I mean,
So I will
think-
say,
think-
I just. Oh, go ahead.
No. I was just gonna say, I think for me, it just hit at just the right moment. I mean, when it came out and where I was in my gaming career and all of that, that there was just something about it that was just, it was so comforting. And I think at that time when there were sort of fewer cozy games, and this is sort of a very, again, I found a really nice mix of, it was very cozy in its feel, but it also gave your brain just enough to do to be like, okay, can I get past that threshold of 10? Can I get that extra crate open? Can I get that extra building built, before the end of the game? And I think those kind of 2 things together just made it a very unique experience.
Yeah, I definitely fell in love with the art. Just like the design of it is just beautiful and welcoming and friendly. But also, you have an evil king, so what are you gonna do?
Yeah, that was
Spoilers.
Oh yeah,
fun.
sorry.
There's still there,
He might be good. I don't.
All right. Molly, you have any other final thoughts or anything?
I just think I'm just trying to think of it like in a time when there are a lot of legacy games. It just feels like a very unique one. Just building like your own little section of a town. It just creates a story that like I've played twice and heard of like 20 campaigns, and they all just seem different. And it's just a really special little game for that. And I find
Mhm.
just enjoying the ride and not taking it too seriously. It just is a really special experience. It just embrace a bit of the chaos that comes, and it's a lot of fun. I really liked it.
Well, Garrett, Connie, thanks so much for coming on and spending some time with us and talking some Charterstone. I think that's all I have for Charterstone. Everyone else is good.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us.
Of course.
Yeah. All right. Well,
All right.
thanks everyone. Thanks, Garrett. Thank you, Connie. And we'll see you guys next time with who knows what board game that we're going to spotlight.
Bye bye, everyone.